Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Future of XYZ. I am thrilled to welcome Joyce Shen to the program. Joyce, thank you for joining us on Future of XYZ.
Thanks for having me, Lisa. I'm a big fan of your program.
Thank you for saying so. We're going to talk about something that I am going to guess that most listeners and viewers know very little about. When you and I were prepping and discussed the topic, I mean, you as an institutional investor with incredible corporate experience as well, running multi-billion-dollar P&Ls at major companies from IBM Cloud Computing all the way, to various other companies where you've been, including Thomson Reuters. I wanted to just I thought we were going to be talking about cybersecurity or investing or something like this. And you're like, let's talk about the future of deep tech. So I want to just load the question up front. What is deep tech?
Yeah, that's a great question, Lisa. I mean, I think different people describe it differently, but in general, in my view, in layman's terms, deep tech is essentially technology that have very complex engineering, science, mathematical components, where it takes a lot of time to figure out how do you actually evolve that technology into something that's useful for everyday people. Versus the other kinds of software and technology that we use every day, that's well known, that's the applications is prevalent, and engineers can just pick up different APIs and write a program. That's not deep tech, that's high tech. But deep tech is really hard things, hard scientific engineering things where it takes a lot of time and a lot of capital usually to evolve that into something that's useful.
Is a reasonable comparison when you mention a lot of time and a lot of capital? I think about like pharmaceutical development, like the R&D of that. That the lead times are long, the evidence has to be there. Tech is always going to be a little bit different, but is that even like remotely a fair analogy? And as an investor, I mean, I'm curious how you invest.
Yeah, absolutely. There are investors who dedicate their lives to drug discovery, and now especially things you hear like synthetic biology and really understanding how do you take existing biological processes and using engineering methods and AI and other things to better and faster develop drugs. That's actually one area of deep tech. So you're exactly right.
Interesting. So, I mean, I think some of the questions, because I certainly, don't know. And when we discussed doing this topic, I mean, so you've explained what deep tech is. I mean, where are some examples perhaps that deep tech is already in our daily usage or our, in our lives that most of us don't know about?
Yeah, that so let's just go down some of the examples. So you actually hit on one that's really big. And so if we think about how COVID vaccine came about in such a short period of time and the technology that was used by the global manufacturers and so forth, that's deep tech. That took years to really understand how do you take something that we'll use for targeted cancer treatment, for example, and turn that into a vaccine that can rapidly developed, that can accommodate or meet different needs based on the strains. So one big area is biology and drug discovery. Another area that's impacting our lives is or future of our lives is autonomous vehicles. And so you're already seeing that there are autonomous trucks, there are autonomous cars. I just saw a video where they're doing, there are companies actually manufacturing autonomous cars now. That's deep tech. That's really taking deep learning, understanding different kinds of data, understand the environment, and allow a machine to be able to think like a human and understand the situations and drive that car without making mistakes like hitting something or hitting a person. Obviously, there's a long way to go, but that's another example. I think there is a lot of applications in the enterprise side for enterprises that don't directly have impact to us every day, but it does have indirect impacts.
When we talk about enterprise, I always feel like obliged to make sure that we don't get too wonky. And it's a common term, especially in the tech sector, which is like enterprise software. And this is where you've spent a lot of your career. We're talking about big corporations, right? Large scale applications.
Yeah. multi-billion-dollar companies, or even hundreds of millions of in revenue, companies with hundreds of millions in revenue that need a lot of technology to enable them to do things, to run things, but to do it competitively and to also build innovation out of this technology. So on the enterprise side, if you think about, a topic that's top of mind for everybody today is energy security, just given what's happening in the world. And the world can't shift to renewable energy, alternative energy sources fast enough, but there are work in progress. And so a lot of capital investments have gone into renewable energy, whether it's looking at hydrogen, whether it's looking at electrification of cars and the infrastructure that support electrification. Those are generally categorized as deep tech in the sense that they still need a lot of time to develop and mature and scale to the point where you and I and everybody else can just get off the highway and plug in an EV and charge for 5 minutes and we can go. It's not possible today.
Right. And so there's actually a really interesting, there are multiple, you're talking about like the consumer application, you're talking about the enterprise application. And then what you're talking about there is kind of like infrastructural applications that have an impact on society more broadly.
Yes. So to answer your question, there are lots of areas of deep tech where today it's not tangible to consumers, but it will come because of the applications that we've all over time built out. And supply chain is another great example as well, where how do you make the food supply chain more sustainable, more green, and only apply fertilizer, pesticides to only those areas that are needed.
Yeah.
That takes a lot of technology to really understand the crops.
This is like the ag tech side of things.
Exactly. And so a lot of ag tech is deep tech in many ways. And robotics too. So
well, this is so fascinating. And so I want to kind of drill in a little bit further so that we can really look at like the future of deep tech, right? And as an investor where you're investing and kind of how you judge success or timelines and all these things. But I think for now, I'm curious, you've mentioned all these different applications. There are a lot of buzzwords out there right now around tech, which is like blockchain, AI, ML, machine learning. Like there's a lot, much less like, augmented and virtual reality and all these kinds of things. I think the average person, these are buzzwords that are coming at us more and more, but we don't really necessarily understand what they are, B, how they apply to us. Are we even talking? You talked about machine learning a little bit, but like deep tech is going beyond even these buzzwords, right? It's kind of figuring out ways of blending them. And as you said, highly mathematical, which is your background. Of course, you did statistics and economics at University of Chicago. I have an MBA from there and written lots of books on computational behavior and these kinds of things. So how would we get down to layman's terms about like, what are those new buzzwords in their relation to deep tech?
Yeah, that's a great question. One way I think about it is if you think about all the different technologies out there, whether they are blockchain, as you said, or machine learning or quantum computing, which we haven't even talked about, all the technologies serve in my view, very specific purposes. And so you have technology that help store data, do computation. You have technology that be able to understand all sorts of data and then perform certain set of tasks and do it in specific ways. So when we think about deep technology for people who are not in technology, we can actually break down all kinds of buzzwords into this area. So as example, blockchain is a different way of storing data and storing information that you could argue better or different from the existing data stores. Quantum computing is a completely different way of doing computation. Machine learning is a different way there are many different subset areas of machine learning. It's different way of doing computation based on information or data given or available. And so like what people are saying, every industry, I think it follow the same kind of, in my word, like stack. And so you have the stack being, what are the key components?
The tech stack we're talking about.
Exactly, the technology stack, the components that will make a technology valuable, that can be applied for different kind of problems that you and I and everybody else care about. And so at the end of the day, it's, is the core component or the core mission of that component store information? Is it about protecting information? Is it about computing? Or is it about taking all those information and perform certain of tasks based on certain rules or based on some kind of learning? So I think that's a way of thinking about deep tech.
It's incredible. And I had 30 episodes or so ago, Dr. Eric Daimler on talking about the future of data integration. We talked a lot about quantum computing as a way of solving kind of these complex problems. So it's the only reason I actually am even vaguely familiar with the term. And I think most people are not. I mean, there's a lot of innovation happening in the space, and you're very proximate to it as the principal at 10-4 Holdings. Where is a lot of this coming from? And when I say where, I mean, obviously from a geographic perspective, but also like what sectors, what types of companies, what types of people, like where is this bubbling up?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, in the US, especially, US is known for innovation, entrepreneurship, and actually very strong in terms of core scientific and research at the university level. And so a lot of these deep tech actually come out of research from universities, and some of which the university decide to spin out as companies. Other times, the professors who invented those things and say, well, I would like to build a company around it. And that's another way. But by and large, in the US, you have a lot of advanced research at the university level all over the US. And I think given the innovation and entrepreneurship interests and just that growing mentality of let's build for the future, let's innovate, more and more universities are thinking about how do we take advanced research and find capital to evolve that into something that's useful, that has application. I mean, I think one of the examples, I know this is pretty old example, but if you think about the solar panels, and I think some of the technology on the solar panels actually came from advanced research in some US universities. I mean, this was like 10 or 20 years ago, where people are studying how do you build hardware and apparatus that can capture solar energy, store that, and then turn that into different sources of energy.
Yeah.
And it takes years for people to figure out how to build, how do you make the panel smaller, more efficient, more cost effective. And they have companies say, well, I can build this with a better design. You have companies now doing solar services for households.
Yeah,
you have
industries pop up around this research.
So deep tech is really, you have this advanced research about this could be useful for a particular application, and then you build around it. And I think with respect to like cyber, quantum computing, machine learning, they all kind of follow the same pattern. Is there are some hypothesis about this could be useful for these basic functionality as we talked about. Is it storing data? Is it storing something? Is it transporting? Is it communicating? Is it computation? And then over time, with capital, with innovation, with great ideas from people, you build ecosystem around it. And that's how you get deep tech into the hands of everyday folks.
And it's you explain this so eloquently, and obviously you're an adjunct professor at UC Berkeley, and I'm sure there's tons of research given its proximity to the Valley, as well as just its incredible pull internationally. in that space. So thank you for explaining that. I'm curious, you mentioned energy security earlier, given the situation with Russia that the globe is facing as a result. Security overall has been a concern for a long time in everything that is tech. How easily systems can become, let's say hacked, how privacy can be compromised. In the case of deep tech, there are obviously, I am sure, deep tech applications to combat this. But within deep tech itself, how are you as an investor looking at risk mitigation?
Yeah, one of the things about the complex systems that have been built in any industry is the vulnerabilities are not well understood. So whether it's at the code level, whether it's just being able to understand what are the different kind of parameters or entry points of a complex system, the integration points, the entry points. And so there are a lot of companies that are focused on building cyber defense systems for complex systems. And it's really hard in terms of how do you defend a complex system that has to run 24/7. Some part of it is legacy, meaning old, some part of it is new. You have different employees or people who have different understanding of cybersecurity. How do you do all of that together to maintain strong cyber defense? From an investor's perspective, I think cybersecurity is because it's so relevant for every organization, for every individual, that cybersecurity is no longer considered technology that need years to evolve to get into the hands of organizations and individuals. In fact, cybersecurity it's just grown so fast because of cloud technology, because of data, because of just this overall increased awareness of the need that if you look at cybersecurity alone, there are thousands of companies in the space. There are investors who just dedicate all of their time focused on cybersecurity, whether it's protecting data, which continue to be a big question as you have newer applications, new use cases, the ability to defend, again, complex systems, some of which are online, offline, all over the place in distributed fashion, and protecting cyber warfare, right? Which is also relevant, that countries are using cyber attacks as a way of attacking other countries. And that's beyond the discussion of this call, but it takes a lot of data, signals, people, systems to really understand how to do that. But I think
it's all risen quite quickly. I mean, I feel like it's,
yeah.
I mean, we think about like the power that we carry in our little pockets these days, is multifold bigger than the largest mainframe in the 80s even. I mean, this is unbelievable how quickly the access has happened and regulation isn't keeping up. Well, as an investor, I mean, you talk about people who just focus, for instance, on cybersecurity or on health tech or whatever it may be. Where are you focused and what are you most interested and excited about for the future?
Yeah, I would like to call myself a deep generalist. And so because of my background and the fact that I've worked at IBM and Thomson Reuters and many other places where I'm able to apply, I think, as I shared, some of these fundamental concepts to different kinds of technology. So in my view, you're always going to have the next new technology. You're always going to have the next wave of advanced research into technology. But ultimately, it's about understanding where these technologies sit and be able to think about useful applications. So for me, instead of thinking about technology as a starting point, I think about the problems, because that's where the value lies for all of us, right? Absolutely. Technology is an enabler. And so what are the big problems faced by our world? You just mentioned one, cybersecurity. It's not about the technology itself. It's about how do we make sure that we protect
everything that makes the world work.
Yeah. Exactly. The systems that make it work, people's wealth, so that their bank accounts don't get hacked. As you have newer types of application like metaverse and crypto, everything, there is potential of data leakage. And how to make sure that engineers, data scientists, and business are building responsibly and they build secure applications. So that's one. So it's protecting ourselves in kind of this digital age, which I think largely is about cybersecurity and many other things. The other is, how do we ensure that we have secure supply chain and responsible supply chain, that the tier 3 suppliers, for example, are not taking advantage of people in emerging markets in some remote areas to produce our coffee beans. I think that's important. Another area
we just talked about that last week.
Yeah, exactly.
Coffee.
Yeah. And another area is energy. I think energy it's not just about energy. It's what people talk climate tech, but I think there are really two areas to that. One is consumption. How do we help human beings change their behaviors, perhaps through technology, to reduce consumption of plastic packaging, of getting on plane when it's not necessary for business meeting, et cetera, et cetera.
Driving differently to utilize gas.
Exactly. So one is reducing consumption, and other is finding alternative, better ways of producing energy or redistribute energy to where it really needs. And education, healthcare, I think those are the major areas. So for me, it's about understanding these problems, and then go find technology or invest in technology that can play a role in solving those problems.
So we're just about at time, Joyce, and this is like obviously a very big conversation to try to squeeze into 20 minutes, even for the interviewer who doesn't know a lot about this. I'm curious, things are changing so rapidly as we talk about, and the applications are needed today because the systems have already been built. These things that we're talking about already are in process, right? We need to make sure that we reduce carbon emissions. I mean, there are lots of things that are in progress. What is the timeline as you're looking at investments and evaluating in this deep tech space? What is the timeline? I mean, how are you accommodating the fact that it needs to happen yesterday, and yet, these things take time, as we started speaking about?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think generally speaking, venture capital has a timeline of 10 years. Investing in any particular company. And so I think that's a pretty good benchmark to understand how company evolve to build something that can scale to achieve enough impact. So 10 years is kind of the traditional benchmark. However, if you look at different areas, investors tend to invest in things that are more, not more obvious, but things that can be part of a key element of that kind of fundamental shift. So a very quick example here, just to give you a sense, is, for example, everybody's talking about climate tech.
Yeah.
So there's so many areas in climate tech, like hydrogen, and hydrogen is going to take years to really understand how this works, how to take it to market,
how to make it energy efficient, to actually
how to even transport it, how do you, all kinds of things to actually build a market around it.
Yeah.
But one of the easier things to do is, well, there's already a lot of data about carbon footprint. Do organizations understand their carbon footprint? If they don't understand it, they can't measure it, they can't take initial, minimal, and basic steps to address some of the obvious gaps. So investors are investing a lot in carbon accounting, which is another term to describe measuring carbon footprint.
Yeah, and then
so that organizations and then again measure, analyze, build programs to make interim progress toward this bigger goal. Obviously, it's not happening as fast as everybody wants in terms of climate, but and I can't generalize for all investors. There are investors who are going the other way. They have long-term patient capital, like the Gates of the world. They are investing in a lot of these really deep tech, hard tech, where we're not going to see the fruit of labor for another 10, 20 years, but
we need it, right? We need investors to take that long-term view as well as like the gains in the short term.
Yeah. So you need both to be able to bring all sides of technology together to enhance understanding for everybody. And so that eventually, in the near future, you are up-leveling the organizations and businesses that are driving a lot of these actions, educating the masses about why these topics are important, pulling more capital from both government and private sectors, while investing in this much longer term technology, so that we're not just standing, we're making progress toward a goal while these bigger problem, harder questions get solved in the background.
It's so interesting. Joyce, I could keep talking about this.
I know.
I really, actually, hopefully we can get you back on, maybe talk about cybersecurity or one of these other topics as we go forward. But thank you for joining us on Future of XYZ today to talk about the future of deep tech, which is very big a future, it seems.
Yeah. Thanks, Lisa, for having me.
And to our listeners and viewers, thank you for joining us today with Joyce Shen, principal investor at 10-4 Holdings. We are available, as you know, if you're watching on YouTube. You can also find us on any of your favorite streaming podcast streaming platforms, from Apple and Spotify to Amazon and beyond. Follow us on Instagram at Future of XYZ, or visit future-of.xyz to nominate a guest or learn more about LVG & Co. We look forward to seeing you next week. Joyce, again, thank you, and keep up the amazing work.
Thank you, Lisa.